Amanda Strawhacker es además profesora adjunta del Colegio Experimental de la Universidad de Tufts. También ha trabajado en el Edukatic en programas de desarrollo profesional docente. Y en este campo sus intereses se centran en la interacción niño-computador, tecnologías apropiadas para el desarrollo, aprendizaje basado en juegos y estrategias de solución de problemas en edad temprana. En el 2003 recibió el premio Elliott Pearson, otorgado a la integración entre investigación y práctica, gracias a su investigación en las escuelas públicas de Boston sobre interfaces de programación de computadores con estudiantes de Kindergarden. Damos nuevamente la bienvenida a la doctora Amanda, la recibimos con un aplauso.
For Twitter. Buenos días. Me llamo Amanda Strawhacker y soy de los Estados Unidos. What's the word? Lamento por mi mal español, pero muchas gracias a Edukatic por la traducción. Okay. So I am a researcher at Tufts University. I work primarily with very young children, and I work at the DevTech Research Group. At the DevTech Group, I'll talk a lot more about the educational technology that we design and evaluate. But first, I want to play one of my favorite children's games. Since we work with such young children, I hope it's okay if we play some games, because that's obviously the best way to learn for young children, is to play. So, if you don't mind, I'd like to play one of my games. Which of these things is not like the other? Does everyone know this game, maybe? Okay. So please raise your hands if you think that the computer is the most different. Okay. No, no one. How about the television? One strong vote. Okay, the iPad? No? Maybe a few? All right. And paintbrush? Ah, many more votes. Excelente. Okay, so we'll talk more about this game later. We'll return to this. But for now, I'll tell you a little bit about my group, the DevTech Research Group. We actually are in the same building as an early childhood school, and it gives us the best way to stay close to our research, which is what can go right in the lives of children when they engage with new technologies. Oftentimes you'll hear people say that technologies can be scary for young children. We don't know how the screens affect them. We don't know what they're learning. Okay. But we endeavor to create technologies that can promote learning rather than hinder it. So, go ahead. So one of the best ways, since we are always looking at schools, is to consider physical comparisons, physical spaces where children learn, to the digital spaces where children can learn. So if we want to create appropriate digital spaces, let's see how children learn in the physical world. So this is a playground. I'm sure all of you have seen playgrounds before. You can feel free to call out some things, some learning that you see children engaging in at the playground. What do children do at the playground? Español está. Okay. Can you translate for me as they call? Translate anything that you hear. Louder. Motor skills, yeah, so they're moving, they're playing. Anything else? Just exercise? They're exploring social skills. Maybe they're playing with their peers. They're exploring Maybe they're exploring gravity, the physical world. They might be exploring how to break rules. And there are a lot of risks associated with the playground. There are skinned knees and there are bumped heads, but I don't think that any educator would say that that means we shouldn't use them, right? It's a learning experience for the children to hurt themselves and learn what happened, what went wrong, and what they can do in the future to avoid it. And where are the adults at the playground? See, they're in the back, they're watching. They're not making up the games for the children to play. They're not teaching them the rules. They're not playing with them. It's child-directed, and it's very much in control of the child to decide how they want to play. And adults, honestly, usually don't know what the games are. They can't understand, because children have a million rules all mapped out in their heads. But the important thing is that it's open-ended, and there are risks, but it's child-directed. So now let's consider another physical environment for children's learning, a playpen. What kind of learning happens in the playpen? Any? Okay, it's limited. There are rules, and the rules being essentially you can't walk past this gate. Maybe there is some learning that can happen if a parent or a guardian puts in a toy or a game. Maybe mom chooses another friend to place in the playpen with them. But it's something chosen by the adult. It's not something the child imagines on their own. Now, just because it's not child-directed doesn't mean it's not a good way to learn. You know, playpens are very safe. There are not many risks that can happen. It's a good place for mom or dad to leave the child safely while they go make dinner. It has its uses, but it doesn't mean that it's the best or the only way for children to learn. When you consider this analogy against digital spaces, and when I say digital spaces, I really do mean adult-designed digital spaces, because everything that we create is for children to explore and engage within. Digital spaces that are on the market today are almost entirely playpens. They teach skills that an adult chose. They practice, repeat the same skill over and over. There's not much creativity. You know, you can play a game, but you're not designing it. You can't change the ending. And there's only so much you can do before you get bored. Consider instead digital playgrounds. There are many digital playgrounds out there. These are just two of them. We've endeavored at our group to create these two playgrounds. I'll talk more about Scratch Junior, and if we have time at the end, I'll discuss the Kibo robot. And I'll talk about how we designed these to be playgrounds. We kept in mind that we wanted it to be child-directed, open-ended, and be a facilitator rather than a leader of children's learning. Make sense? So, this morning you heard Professor Cañas, in his amazing speech, talk about how the number one most important factor in a student's learning is what they came in already knowing. And that's true even of 5 to 7-year-old children. It is astounding, the ideas, the hypotheses that they have already created. Young children from ages 2 to 7 are in the pre-operational stage of development, what Piaget called the pre-operational stage. And we could argue back and forth about Piaget. But essentially, most educators would agree that at this young stage, children have a lot of ideas. Just like scientists, they're absorbing the world around them, trying to make sense of the evidence that they can see and touch and feel, and forming strong beliefs and hypotheses. And usually, the challenge with teaching young children, just like with college students, is finding out where these challenges are and where these mistakes in their thinking are. But what's different about young children is that they have thousands of mistakes in their thinking. It's impossible to know where to start. And not only do they have many mistakes, but they are convinced that they are correct because they've seen it. They know. For example, I had a friend growing up, I think I told this story a little earlier, where she only knew girls with blue eyes and men with brown eyes. So she knew that women only had blue eyes. It's a good hypothesis. It's not correct. But no matter how many times her parents told her that men and women can have different colored eyes, she never saw evidence to the contrary, so she didn't believe her. She was sure she knew the correct answer, and her mom was mistaken. When you think about how to change children's thinking, you're already starting down the wrong path. It's impossible. You're not going to be able to do it. Because we know also from Piaget that children learn by doing. They learn by touching, interacting, engaging with objects in the world around them. It's called what he called constructivism. But how can we have them touch and engage in a way that challenges their own thinking? Well, Professor Cañas also mentioned Seymour Papert, a mentor of his and a personal academic influence of mine, who was a student of Piaget's. And he proposed the idea of constructionism. He said, it's not enough for students to just touch and play and push objects in the world around them. They have to create something new. They start to understand the world around them when they start to build new things. And interestingly, this building of new objects and creating knowledge through design coincides with a time period in children's development. I already mentioned pre-operational stage. Later in their pre-operational development, children develop, something really exciting happens between ages 5 and 7. They develop intuitive thought, which is an academic way of saying they start to realize that they have a lot of ideas, and they become curious about where they came from. They don't remember the evidence that they gathered, and they want to understand how they came to those places. They want to articulate their ideas and their thought patterns. So if we think about learning by doing, Seymour Papert actually championed programming as a wonderful way to introduce the concept of metacognition to children, thinking about your own thinking. Because what you're doing, what you're making when you build a program is a to-do list. That's all it is. It's a to-do list for a computer, a robot, a refrigerator, anything in the world around you to act out. And you can see clearly what your list was. You're making thoughts for the computer. You're making its brain. And in engaging how to make thoughts and a brain for something else, you start to envision your own thoughts and re-examine your own ideas. But it's not enough to give children a really strong platform for designing their own ideas and thoughts. They also need to know how to make something. They're still learning everything. So something that we teach a lot in our classrooms is a model for design learning. And what better way to learn about making something than going back to engineers who make things for a living. They design problems to answer questions. They design problems. My mistake. They design solutions. Sometimes problems. They design solutions to questions and problems. And when we explain it to the children, we give them steps that they can follow. It doesn't have to be linear. It doesn't have to be one after the other. But we ask them to ask a question to themselves. How can I make the most beautiful ballerina that I can make out of clay? Once you have a question that you care about, start imagining what it might look like, how you might do it. We ask them to plan, sometimes in their head, sometimes on paper, sometimes verbally, what they could do, and model their creation. When they start to finally make something, they want to see if it can move. Maybe your ballerina can spin on its shoe. So test that. Test and see if you can improve and refine and iterate your design. And of course, you always, always need to share what you've made and gather feedback and ideas from your friends and your teachers. So if you recognize this process, it's because it's what real engineers do. And when I say real engineers, I really mean adult engineers, because children are, of course, also real engineers. And you can see that we've put, more adult terminology on it. But it's the same concept. They brainstorm, they construct a prototype, they test and they redesign, and they communicate. These are skills that last you your entire life. And I'm not trying to convince you that we need more engineers in school, because actually this process might translate to the scientific method. Maybe you recognize designing a hypothesis, an experiment, and drawing conclusions to test and analyze what you thought. Maybe you recognize the writing process. When you're constructing a written work, you organize an outline. You don't just sit down and write the next great Colombian novel. You have to think about your drafts. You have to edit. You have to share with your peers, get their feedback, see what they think. Did you miss something? So we've endeavored, in this collaboration, to create Scratch Junior, a platform not to teach children anything, but to give them a platform to learn about their own thinking, to explore in whatever way makes sense to them what they can do through programming. So it's a collaboration between our DevTech research group at Tufts, led by Professor Marina Machiberes, who's very sorry she could not be here, and she would have given this presentation in Spanish, so I apologize. It's also a collaboration with the MIT Lifelong Kindergarten group, led by Professor Mitchell Resnick, a colleague of Professor Cañas. And it's also led by the Playful Invention Company, friends of ours who developed the actual code behind the app. So I know that most of you in the audience are more familiar with Scratch than Scratch Junior. Is correct? Okay. So in order to give you a clearer idea of how we designed Scratch Junior to be more accessible to young children, I want to show you an example of what something very simple that even a 3-year-old can do might look like when you code it. So this is a coded a program in Scratch to make a character jump. And not just any kind of jump, this is a gravitationally accurate jump. And you can see it's actually pretty short, pretty elegant. I found this on the Scratch wiki. It's got authority behind it. But if you look at it, you can see that there are already some very complex concepts. There's more than one program. Parallel programming, already too complicated for a 4-year-old. There are variables. There are nested repeat loops. It's overall a little clunky and difficult to communicate all of these elements to a child when it is something that even a 2-year-old knows how to do with their bodies. And we already discussed how children learn how to do everything by doing it with their bodies first. So now I want to show you how we changed this a little bit to make a jump program in Scratch Junior. So you can already see, much simpler, much simpler. It's one block, because when children understand a concept, it's already an entirely built idea in their heads. They're not ready to start thinking about bending your knees and stretching upwards and leaving the ground. A jump is hard enough. It's hard enough to think about without breaking it down into its constituent parts. But eventually, we do want them to be able to break it down into its constituent parts. That's part of computational thinking, as we'll talk about a little later. So just to give you a little bit of an idea of what Scratch Junior looks like, I'm going to show you a demonstration video, and I'll talk over it so you can see what's happening. So you can imagine this child is going to open their app and create a new project. They're going to select a background, but they don't like the ones we made. So actually, they're going to take a picture instead. It makes it a little more meaningful to them. Maybe this is their houseplant. Once they've selected the picture, they're going to go back to their project, and now they don't really like the cat, so they want to pick a new character. They could design their own, but this time, they'll pick the frog. This frog is going to be living in the plant. And now comes the important part. They want the frog to jump. They want it to grow and to shrink.
Ribbit.
They want to record their own sound, their voice is part of the frog's program. And they want it all to happen in a repeat loop 4 times. Finally, they want all of this to start when they press the green flag. Now this is someone who has mastered Scratch Junior. But you can also add multiple pages to introduce the idea of telling a story from beginning to end. You can explore numeracy with the grid, and you can also add text to screen to explore early literacy. So you can form your own opinions about what Scratch Junior is and what we've made, and I'm thrilled to hear them. But just to give you a little background of what we were thinking about when we designed it, we wanted it to be low floor, high ceiling, wide walls. So if you've heard this analogy before, it means we wanted anyone to come in and just be able to dive right in. We wanted them to be able to start tapping and touching and seeing things happen before their eyes, low floor. It doesn't take much to see something amazing happen. We wanted an appropriately high ceiling. It can do a lot of the things that Big Brother Scratch can do. It can't do everything because 5-year-olds and 7-year-olds aren't ready for everything. But once they are, they can graduate to Scratch. And I think wide walls is the most important feature. Not every child wants to start with green flag. Not every child wants to start with motion blocks. We've designed this program so that there is no wrong way to learn Scratch Junior. It's very self-directed. The teachers can teach it in however way makes sense to them, but you can be sure the children will half the time not listen. And that's fine. Ultimately, they end up learning it anyway, because it's tinkerable. And what I mean by tinkerable is that it allows for children to mess around and play. We already know that children learn the best when they're playing. That's the work of a child. Play with the world, test the boundaries, see what's happening. Of course, we wanted it to be fun, convivial. We wanted it to seem like an exciting and beautiful piece of art that they were making. And I'll talk a little bit later about how it's not all about the kids. We wanted it to have classroom supports and home supports for anyone who is interested in bringing Scratch Junior into their homes or classrooms, but was not sure where to start. Now, I would tell you right now that if you don't know what you're doing with programming, you are an excellent model for a child. But if you feel like you need more supports, because adults always do, children never do, we have those for you. Go ahead. This is just a little bit of our research timeline. We actually started with Scratch version 1.4 5 years ago with a very small contingent of children in that school attached to our building. And we came in and we sat down with kindergarten. We actually sat down with preschool, kindergarten, first grade and second grade students. And we asked them, what did they think? Do you like it? You don't like it? Does it make sense? Across the board, they had a lot of opinions about Scratch Junior, and because they were 4 through 7, they knew they were right. So we took their advice, and we designed a pilot. We designed actually several pilots, because of course we are engineers, and we were testing and redesigning, going back and forth to imagining and creating our prototypes. We've also developed several assessment methods and designed curricula, all as part of our studies. You know, we're not experts either, the children are the experts. So we wanted to make sure that we had a wealth of information about how they would use the tool and what they would do with it before we released it to public. And I'm happy to say that now it is available for free in the Apple App Store. It's available for most Android tablets. We're endeavoring to make sure that it's available on more. And hopefully this summer it'll be available on Android version 4.2 or later. We're hoping to come out with a PC or web-based computer version. And so far we've been met with overwhelming responses from our fans. We've had almost 100,000 downloads and we're still counting. So that's 100,000 kids exploring Scratch Junior in our minds. But you might still be asking yourself, what could this possibly look like in a classroom? There's no way that this works as smoothly as she is telling us it does. So I want to show you a brief video of projects that we've collected from students in our classrooms. These are mostly second graders, but I want to, excuse me. I want to make sure before I show you the video that you understand something about this video. Every child you are going to see in this video was being interviewed and is answering interview questions that were being asked by peers, not by researchers, not by teachers. These are 7-year-olds talking to each other about their projects. So let's take a look and see what they've created.
I have a baby and zebra, and when you tap the green flag, the zebra goes, and you're going to try to get across. And when you hit the zebra, it says go back.
So 2 of them disappear? And how do you make them disappear?
Well,
It's okay, here real quick.
I made the green one disappear the longest, and the blue one disappear the longest, and then she comes back shortly. Tell me about your project. Tell me about your project. So my project's about a wizard. So I put the frog and the lizard together the whole time. So I did that. And it turns pink. And then they're in the jungle. On this page, the wizard is fighting the ranger. And then for the other ones, I put the start on tap block. And then the jumping one, and then it will say now. Start. And I got these blocks here. And here.
But I've never, thought that it would be, like, she's ready for it, and I'm really glad. Like, she did some amazing things in the program, so I think we're going to purchase it. Is it purchase
Free.
It's free? Oh, we're going to download it.
This has been like a highlight of her secondary school for the last year. It's been really
Okay, so that was maybe a little bit fast, but I hope that you could see that children were creating amazing collages and stories and games. And we had a researcher in the classroom with them the whole time cataloging everything that they were doing because, again, they were playing, and we know that play for children is hard work. So we tried to categorize what kinds of work we saw. And I'm borrowing here Brennan and Resnick's framework for computational thinking skills because computational thinking, how many of you have heard this phrase, computational thinking? Most of you. And it means something different to almost everyone, I think. It's very difficult to categorize, so I just want to be clear and define how we talk about computational thinking in my lab. When you think of a computer, at its heart, we're not trying to get kids to think more like a machine, because a computer is just a very, very simplified model of a human brain. We want children to be able to more effectively and efficiently use their own brains. That's all computational thinking means. Using order, using concepts of logic to be able to explain and organize their thoughts in a more computational way, a simpler way, so that they don't become confused by new concepts. And they can organize their own thoughts and their own learning, the way we know they're very curious to do in second grade. So Brennan and Resnick discuss 3 ways to observe computational thinking behaviors and suggest some methods for assessment. So the first behavior is computational concepts, very simple ideas of computational thinking that most children can master pretty quickly. So as early as kindergarten, we have observed and categorized children using repeat loops, using message passing, which is a way to have characters interact with each other, and using parallel programming. Remember, I talked a little bit about parallel programming, having more than one program for the same character earlier with the scratch jump example. They do eventually get there, and they do master those concepts. But concepts are just ideas, and as we know from our earlier discussion, the ideas mean nothing without the context. So we also have noticed computational practices, behaviors that the children engage in when they're working. We see them testing and debugging several versions and iterations of their project. That's very important because it means that they're persistent, they're persevering, they're emotionally invested in what they're creating. And without emotional investment on the part of the child, how can you learn anything? It means nothing to you. And we also see them look at their friend's project and think, that's a good idea. I'm going to borrow part of their project and put it into my project. They're adapting ideas. They're seeing what's modeled and assimilating it into what they need it for. They're repurposing ideas. That's a very advanced concept, but it's a practice that they engage in with Scratch Junior because it's concrete, it's easy. And most importantly to me, we see computational thinking perspectives arise in the children that we work with. The children that we've seen really think of themselves as designers and engineers by the end of our work with them. Or any teachers work with them, any parents work with them. They already know that they can make a project. They're sure when they first get started. But when they actually start to use the software, it's hard. It is. And they have to test and debug and re-examine their thinking, as I mentioned before. So for them to meet that challenge and come away with a renewed sense of identity and empowerment in their own ability to use this program it's incredible. And we can also see them engage in these computational thinking. ¿Está bien? Oh, it's okay? Okay. Sorry. So we, in the videos that I showed you, you may also hear, I'm not actually sure if it captured it, but we often observe children helping each other. So one interviewee was getting maybe a little bit scared or stuck. So the interviewer leans over, 7-year-old, leans over and says, I remember you told me this part was really hard to make. Can you tell me more about that? That's a teaching practice. The child is becoming a teacher at that moment. And that's not only amazing because it's really cute, but it's also an indicator that not only are they thinking about their own process, not only can they envision and understand the process of a program, but they can place themselves in the mind of their peer, understand what they're trying to do, figure out their challenge, and help them overcome it. They became a facilitator, and that is a gift that they will carry with them for the rest of their lives. But I'm not trying to sell you on the idea of just computational thinking skills. I'm not even trying to sell you on programming. I come from a background of human biology and evolution. I'm mainly concerned with how people use tools. And I consider programming just another tool that happens to coincide with our lifetimes. So when you look at the kinds of foundational skills that are targeted by traditional tools in classrooms that were at one time very novel, for example, crayons, written books, or games, you see children engage in self-expression when they're coloring a picture, or maybe when they're engaging in dramatic play. They're pretending to be someone's mother. And they're also doing that in Scratch Junior when they make a story about themselves, or they tell a story that no one else has told before. That's the definition of communication and self-expression. And by the time they get to second grade, they're already thinking about their audience. That's pretty unique, that they're already imagining the person who will hear their story and trying to design something for a user. We also see a lot of sequencing and order, which I'll talk about in a moment. Every day in a child's life is ordered. You see them learning the schedule of the day, wake up in the morning, brush your teeth, get dressed. You see them read a book from beginning to end. And in Scratch Junior, of course, order is built in to the program. If I put my jump block before my grow block, I'll see something different than if I reverse it. It's very concrete. It's easy for them to understand. But it's also important in how they structure their projects. This is a huge system that they're designing. They're telling a story. Just like with reading a book, they need to know and think and plan about what happens first, what do they want to happen next, and how will it end. And of course, problem solving, one of the most important skills that young children can engage in. Not only problem solving in terms of logical gameplay, trying to figure out the best way to solve a challenge, but of course, problem solving, we talked about on the playground. Someone pushed me. I didn't like that. I have a choice to go and punch them in the head, or go get a teacher, or do nothing. Those are struggles they have. These are very real challenges for a 5-year-old. Well, problem solving is also evident in Scratch Junior. Of course, there's social problem solving. He stole my idea. I want it back. So you can have that discussion about citizenship. But there's also problem solving when something surprised you in your program. Now, we designed Scratch Junior, so it's very hard to make a program that does nothing. It's possible, but it's not easy. It is, however, easy to make a program that does not do what you expected it to do. There are surprises, there are bugs. It still does something, but it's not right. Now, children have a choice here. They can either forget their first plan and decide it's fine the way it is, and they have learned nothing. Most of the time, what happens when they're ready, children will decide that it's not good enough. I can do better, I'm gonna keep working on it, and they get their friends to come help them. They figure out ways to endeavor through the challenge, and that's how they master the skill in addition to the tool. I want to talk a little bit more about sequencing in order because it is so important. Sequencing is a foundational skill, not just in early numeracy and pre-math, but it's also a foundational skill for literacy. Alphabetization is very important. Knowing how to spell a word is important. And more than that, it's actually a nice indicator for later success in academic domains. So if you see how well a child can sequence in order, you have a pretty good guess, a good pH stick, I guess, I'm not sure, an indicator of how well they'll do a few years down the line, even up to middle school. So we wanted to know specifically how our kids were understanding sequencing after we used Scratch Junior. We know that they're enthusiastic. We can see that they're exploring amazing and inspirational concepts. But can we prove it? What can we show quantitatively in addition to qualitatively? So what we did is we showed them a video of a Scratch Junior project, what they're familiar with, the cat moving around the screen, and we didn't show them the code. Normally we spend a lot of time showing the code and discussing it, just like in the Scratch classes. So we hid the code from them, and we asked them to think in their head, what blocks do you think could possibly have been used to make up that program? Now, are you starting to see the connection between the jump example I gave you earlier? Now we're starting to piece apart the constituent parts of an action, of a program, in a way that makes sense to them. The blocks are their building blocks, literally. We also asked them, once you identify which blocks you think are in the program, can you put them in order? What do you think actually happened to make that program the way that you see it? And we had no idea how this was going to go. We sort of expected it to blow up in our face. But this is just a small sample of the many students that we've been testing with, still in data evaluation stage. And what we found has been very promising. Two very similar kindergarten classrooms that engaged in different amounts of coding with Scratch Junior, different levels of depth. One was much more in-depth. 1 hour, twice a week lessons. So 120 minutes a week of very active, engaged coding. And I want to point out, by the way, that that doesn't mean 2 hours of screen time. You can have Scratch Junior activities without the iPad. And it's actually something that we strongly recommend. I'll talk a little bit more about the resources that you can use for that later. And the other activity, or the other classroom, pretty much only used the iPads for 15 minutes a day, also twice a week. So about 30 minutes of iPad-only instruction, very hands-off. And we noticed that the kindergartners on average in the higher exposure classroom made many fewer mistakes. I know that's sort of backwards, but they essentially overperformed their peers at the other classroom. So another point to take away from this, just because it's an open-ended tool doesn't mean that you're off the hook as a teacher. No instruction is not the same as open-ended instruction. You still need to be there to guide them and shape what they can do next, but let them drive. So of course, I mentioned the classroom supports. Everything that you would need, actually, can you go to the next slide too? Everything that you might need to learn about Scratch Junior yourself, maybe to teach it, to introduce specific concepts, we have tried our best, and we've made it available to you for free. So on the website, scratchjunior.org, you'll find brief activities that we've created, just like Scratch cards. You'll find full-length curricula that we've implemented in schools and you can take or leave whatever you like of it. And of course, you'll find the assessments that we use to measure sequencing in our students. In the app itself, you'll also find a tutorial video, sample projects to maybe get you a little inspired, and of course, for those of us who really need some hand-holding, some interface and block guides to tell you exactly what every single item does. I wouldn't recommend teaching this to the kids, but of course, if you feel that you need a little bit of guidance to double check what you're seeing in front of you, I highly recommend checking out these guides. And I also recommend visiting scratchjunior.org if you we have a community of teachers, and we're endeavoring right now to make, similar to Scratch Online, a community where projects can be shared, educators can share their experiences, and we can make sure that you're hearing from each other your experiences, because of course we researchers don't know anything and in fact barely know what we're doing. It's just shots in the dark. But we're trying our best, and we hope that you'll join in the conversation and give us your experience and feedback, because of course that's the most important. So we have a Twitter, a Facebook. I'm happy to talk to anyone afterwards about our pilot studies. And I would be remiss if I didn't offer the opportunity. Of course, your participation fee would be waived, but if anyone is in the Boston area in August, we host hands-on workshops where you can learn about Scratch Junior and engage with the team. So if you couldn't make it to the workshop that I'm hosting tomorrow, then you can come to Boston and do it with me there. And since we have a little bit of time, is that correct? We have a little time? 20 minutes? Okay. Since we have a little bit of time, I want to also tell you a little bit about our other project, the Kibo robot. I hope that's all right. So the Kibo robot is one of our other digital playgrounds that we're very proud of. It was designed to be made of natural materials, wood, and clear plastic. It's the underside of it is clear, so you can have a discussion about the sensor, or the wires inside, and the electrical parts, and draw comparisons to a human body. Actually, if you want to play the video, I can walk you through what you're looking at. So the Kibo robot has motors with wheels that are easily attachable, so that it can move around on the floor, not on your table because it'll fall off. We also have ports for sensors. So there's a distance sensor, a sound sensor, a light sensor, and also a light bulb. So now we're getting into areas of robotics, outputs and inputs. And this is the programming language. Just like with Scratch Junior, it's image-based and block-oriented, but there's nothing technical about those blocks. They're just wooden blocks with stickers on them that have barcodes that the robot scans, just like at the grocery store. And when you press the button, the robot performs the action that you've coded it to do. You can also add a spinning turntable to make a kinetic sculpture. And of course, we encourage the children to decorate and personalize these robots as much as they can to make it as much a part of their story and not ours as they want. So you can find out more about Kibo robots at kinderlabrobotics.com, or of course at the DevTech Research Group's website. And there's also a workshop the same week for Kibo. But I want to return to this game. I hope, I could be wrong, that some of you have altered your perspective a little bit about what you would vote for as the most different item now. So do you want to take the vote again? Shall we vote? All right, so who thinks that the computer is the most different? No one. All right. Television? I see a lot more hands. Okay. iPad? Some still. And paintbrush. Oh, I see a lot fewer hands this time. So we love this analogy of the paintbrush to the television because at our group, and I think if you've read any of Mitch Resnick's work, maybe you've heard of this analogy. We love the idea that a paintbrush is much more similar to programming than it is to watching TV. Because again, it's child-directed, it's creativity, it's open-ended, and it's something that you can make yourself. Television, you're consuming, and we really want children to be producers and creators of ideas and concepts. Thank you very much. So I think we have time for questions, right? Oh, perfect.
Agradecemos a la doctora Amanda por ya ahí. Sí. Agradecemos a la doctora Amanda por su intervención. Por favor, esperamos las preguntas que las pueden entregar a las personas con camiseta naranja. No se olviden, por favor, de llenar la encuesta de retroalimentación sobre esta conferencia.
En español y pues se la traduce. No, pero a Amanda se la van a traducir, pero yo la puedo leer en el micrófono. Ah, esta está en inglés.
Sí, pero ¿la puedes traducir o te la traducir?
No.
Porque es importante
Sí,
comenzar
porque
en edad temprana.
Bueno, vamos a leer la primera pregunta. Dice, ¿qué tan importante o por qué es importante empezar a usar Scratch Junior en una temprana edad?
Hello? Can I ask you, as opposed to a later age?
What's wrong?
Early and not late. Okay, so why early?
Yeah.
Why so early and why not late?
How important it is to start using Scratch Junior at an earlier age?
Okay, that's a good question. I would say that it's not that it's so important to introduce Scratch Junior at an early age, although I would recommend it. But it's the time when children are the most ready for it. I know that's hard to hear, but they're so curious about what is going on behind the screen. And a lot of times, remember I talked a little earlier about how children are little scientists and they grab conclusions from the world around them, they use evidence, and a lot of times they're wrong. Well, a lot of times those conclusions are the world is magic. Those things are fairies. The sun is the center, or revolves around the earth. There are ideas that they have that make sense to them and hold them in good stead. They're useful. But until we give them a way to concretely evaluate their own thinking, they won't change their thinking. And that's fine until they get to middle school science and realize that something that they've thought all along has to be rethought all the way from the beginning. But the other nice thing about Scratch Junior is that it's concrete, it's clear. Children are not good at abstract thinking. So as much as you tell them this light switch was created by an engineer using wires and it links all the way to electricity and it's all science and I can explain it and show you and that's why it works, they're gonna say, no, I know what happens, it's magic. I can't see the wires in the wall that you're talking about. You must be lying to me because adults lie. So until you give them a concrete way to reevaluate their own ideas, they're not going to change their ideas. They're not going to grow their ideas. So whether you use Scratch Junior or whether you use another open-ended tool that teaches how they can reevaluate their mistakes, I think the most important piece of Scratch Junior, don't let my professor hear you, is it's not the programming as much as the iterative redesign and redevelopment. That engineering design process that I talked about earlier, it's key. It's an amazing skill set. It's a model for how to learn. And if you can't teach them how to learn, then all they do is become stuck in their ideas. Children learn amazingly quickly, but once they have an idea, it's very hard to change their minds. They only trust their own instincts and their own beliefs. So why would they trust you? So Scratch Junior gives them a way to trust themselves and have a conversation with you, rather than fighting you at every turn about new concepts. Make sense?
Listo, la segunda pregunta es, ¿sería muy pronto asegurar que Scratch Junior permite que los niños sean mejores programadores o que avancen como desarrolladores de software en la secundaria?
Yes. Well, first of all, it's only been around 5 years, so even our oldest test group is still in middle school. But even if we wanted to ask that question, I'm not sure that we would, because I don't think we're trying to make more programmers. I don't personally think that a world where everyone can hack and recode their car dashboard is a better one. It might be fun, but it's too limiting. We don't need just programmers. We need visionaries. We need artists. We need teachers. We need writers. So the reason, again, that I'm a broken record, but back to the engineering design process. The design process is the skill that we think will carry up into high school. And of course, it's still too early to say, but we hope that it will empower children to become more cognizant, to think more efficiently and clearly, and to communicate better their process of thinking. And if that means that they want to be a programmer, so be it. But I'm just here to tell you I'm not a programmer, and I don't think you need necessarily programming to be a success in your own right. But I hope that answers the question.
Listo, la última pregunta es, ¿piensa usted que utilizar una rúbrica para evaluar los proyectos de los niños podría limitar su creatividad?
Are we ready to evaluate children's creativity?
Do you think that using a rubric to assess kids' projects could limit their creativity?
Yeah. Yeah, we do, which is why we haven't done it yet. I think partly what we try to do when we engage the children in this process is tell them that they are scientists and experimenters along with us. They're some of the first kids to ever try programming, ever, at that age group. We don't know what we're going to find. We don't know what they're going to make. So why would we pretend to them that we have any idea what to do by measuring them? So I hope you weren't confused by the sequencing assessment, because we actually haven't assigned a rubric to their projects yet. Everything that we've been doing is qualitative. We're trying to organically absorb themes, understand what they make, and use that to inform our design of curricula and the tool. So I don't think it's necessarily even possible to quantify creativity. There are some really exciting research projects going on now where we do have students interested in that question, and they're trying to figure out ways to see if assigning different games and tasks will elicit more creativity. There are certainly rubrics that exist, tasks that try to get at that. But I think that if you just look at the project, you're missing a lot of what the student created. So much of a 5-year-old's design is explaining it to you. They don't exist just in the iPad. They want to tell you about it. They want to show you about it. They want to explain so that you understand. Actually, a lot of the, especially younger grades, make games where the iPad and the project are almost a prop. You can't play the game without the programmer there to explain the game, or it makes no sense. Now, an engineer or a programmer would tell you that's bad design, but a teacher would tell you that's creative. So it's all in your definition.